When Emily lands her dream job at a prestigious marketing firm, it feels like the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. But her world is shattered when her manipulative boss, Nathan, steals her ideas, tarnishes her reputation, and fires her without warning. Stripped of everything she's worked for, Emily sinks into despair, until anger fuels her resolve to get revenge. Through grit, determination, and careful planning, Emily rebuilds her career and strikes back, stealing Redwood's crown jewel client, Silverline Systems. Nathan's empire begins to crumble, and Emily savors her triumph, until she discovers he's making a secret comeback with a shady new venture. Determined to stop him once and for all, Emily confronts Nathan in a high-stakes showdown, exposing his lies and fraud. But Nathan isn't the kind of man to accept defeat. As Emily rises higher, Nathan strikes back in ways she never imagined, launching a ruthless smear campaign that threatens to destroy everything she's built. In a game of power, betrayal, and revenge, Emily learns the hard truth: some wars never truly end. Have you ever felt the thrill of finally reaching the top, only to have the rug pulled out from under you before you could even enjoy the view? That was my life 2 years ago. My name is Emily, and for as long as I can remember, I dreamed of making it big in the marketing world. Not just a cushy desk job, but something more, a career that mattered, where my ideas could change the game. After years of internships, late nights, and jobs that barely paid my rent, I finally got my chance. The day I landed the job at Redwood Marketing was one of the best days of my life. Redwood wasn't just any marketing firm, it was the firm. They handled campaigns for the biggest brands in tech, luxury fashion, and even entertainment. Getting hired there felt like winning the lottery. I remember calling my mom, who'd been so supportive through all the setbacks, and crying tears of joy. "I told you, Emily," she said, her voice warm with pride. "All those years of hard work. They were worth it." And for a while, it felt like they were. At first, everything was a dream come true. My new colleagues were friendly, the work was challenging in all the right ways, and my boss, Nathan Grant, took a special interest in me. Or so I thought. Nathan was Redwood's CEO and the face of the company. He was everything you'd expect from a leader at the top of his game: sharp, charming, and intimidating in the way only truly powerful people can be. On my first day, he pulled me into his glass-walled office and welcomed me with that movie star smile of his. "Emily, I've heard great things about you," he said, clasping my hand in a firm handshake. "I've got a feeling you're going to do big things here." For months, it felt like he meant every word. Nathan started assigning me to high-profile projects almost immediately, giving me more responsibilities than I ever expected as a newcomer. I thought it was because he saw potential in me, that he was grooming me for something bigger. One project in particular became my obsession: Silverline Systems, Redwood's crown jewel client. Silverline was a cutting-edge tech company with a billion-dollar budget and a reputation for being impossible to please. Nathan handed me the reins, saying, "Let's see what you can do." I poured everything into it. Late nights became all-nighters, weekends blurred into weekdays, and coffee became my only fuel. But it was worth it. Within months, I built a relationship with Silverline's executive team that no one else at Redwood had managed to achieve, not even Nathan. They started coming to me directly with ideas, problems, and feedback. I was becoming the face of Redwood for them, and I was proud of it. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon in December. I had just finished presenting a campaign proposal to Silverline's board, and it had gone better than I ever imagined. When I walked out of the boardroom, Rachel Green, one of Silverline's senior executives, pulled me aside. "You've really outdone yourself, Emily," she said, smiling warmly. "Nathan made the right call putting you in charge. This campaign, it's going to be a game-changer for us." Her words filled me with pride, but when I turned to Nathan, who was standing across the room, his expression was unreadable. He gave me a tight-lipped smile, but something in his eyes made my stomach turn. "Emily," he said as we headed back to the office, can you stop by my office before you head out for the weekend? There's something I'd like to discuss. I thought nothing of it at the time. Maybe he wanted to congratulate me or talk about next steps for the campaign. But when I walked into his office that evening, I knew something was wrong. Nathan was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, his hands folded neatly in front of him. A manila folder sat to his right, and I couldn't help but notice my name printed on the tab. "Emily," he began, his voice calm but distant, "I'm afraid I have some difficult news. As of today, we're letting you go." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. Letting me go? What are you talking about? The Silverline campaign is. Silverline is no longer your concern, he cut me off, his tone sharp. The firm is restructuring, and unfortunately, your position is being eliminated. I stared at him, trying to process his words. Eliminated? That doesn't make sense. I just landed the biggest campaign of the year. How can you justify? This isn't personal, Emily, he said, leaning back in his chair with an air of practiced detachment. It's business. We're making decisions that are best for the company. But it was personal, and I knew it. I could see it in the way he refused to meet my eyes, the way he brushed off my questions as though I was some pesky intern rather than the person who had just secured one of the firm's most lucrative contracts. I walked out of his office that night in a daze, clutching the box of belongings I'd hastily packed from my desk. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Why had he done this? What had I done wrong? But deep down, I knew the truth. Nathan hadn't just fired me, he had stolen everything I'd worked for. Over the next few weeks, the full picture began to emerge. Through whispers from former colleagues and rumors circulating in industry circles, I learned that Nathan had presented my ideas to Silverline as his own. Worse, he had planted the idea that I was difficult to work with and resistant to feedback, ensuring that Silverline wouldn't think twice about my sudden absence. It was a calculated move, one that left me with nothing. My reputation in the industry was tarnished, my career was in shambles, and I had no idea how to rebuild. For months, I drifted aimlessly, alternating between anger and despair. I replayed the events over and over in my head, trying to figure out what I could have done differently. But no matter how much I blamed myself, one fact remained: Nathan had betrayed me, and he had done it without a second thought. I didn't know it yet, but that betrayal would become the fuel for the most dangerous and satisfying journey of my life. The weeks after I was fired were a blur of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. My apartment, once a place of refuge, started to feel like a prison. I avoided my friends, ignored my family's calls, and spent hours scrolling through job boards, my inbox filled with polite rejections. It wasn't just the loss of a job, it was the loss of who I thought I was. Nathan had taken everything from me, my career, my confidence, my future. But what hurt the most was knowing he'd walked away unscathed. Every time I checked LinkedIn, there he was, posting smug updates about Redwood's unprecedented growth, smiling in photos with Silverline executives as if he had done the work. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the cracks on my ceiling, I realized something: Nathan wasn't just a bad boss. He was a thief. He'd stolen my ideas, my reputation, and my opportunities. And the longer I stewed on that thought, the more my anger began to morph into something else. Revenge. It started as a fleeting fantasy, the kind of thing you think about in the middle of the night but dismiss by morning. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the only way to move forward. Nathan had taught me a lesson he probably hadn't intended: success wasn't about talent or hard work. It was about power, leverage, and strategy. If I wanted my life back, I had to stop playing fair. The first step was research. For weeks, I buried myself in everything I could find about Nathan and Redwood. I combed through press releases, dug up old articles, and even scrolled through employee reviews on anonymous forums. What I found didn't surprise me: I wasn't the first person Nathan had stepped on to climb higher. There was Sarah, who'd worked at Redwood for 7 years before she was suddenly phased out. Mike, a former junior executive, whose portfolio mysteriously ended up in Nathan's hands after his termination. The pattern was clear: Nathan built his empire on the ruins of others, and I had just been his latest victim. But I wasn't going to stay a victim for long. If I was going to take Nathan down, I needed a way back into the industry. My reputation had taken a hit, but it wasn't completely destroyed. There were still people who respected my work, people who would vouch for me if I played my cards right. That's how I found myself at an industry networking event on a freezing Thursday night in February. The hotel ballroom was packed with the usual crowd: CEOs, account managers, creative directors. I recognized some of them from my time at Redwood, and I could feel their eyes on me as I made my way to the bar. "Emily," a voice said behind me. I turned to see Rachel Green, one of Silverline's top executives. The last time I'd seen her, she'd been singing my praises after that campaign pitch, the one Nathan had stolen. My heart raced as I tried to gauge her expression. Was she angry? Pitying? To my surprise, she smiled. "I was hoping I'd run into you. How've you been?" The question was so simple, but it nearly broke me. For a moment, I considered telling her the truth, that I'd been fired, humiliated, and left to pick up the pieces. But instead, I forced a smile and said, "I've been keeping busy. Exploring new opportunities." Rachel nodded, swirling her glass of red wine. "I was sorry to hear you left Redwood. You were doing incredible work." "Thank you," I said carefully. "It wasn't exactly my choice." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, debating how much to say. This was my chance, my first real chance, to plant the seeds of doubt. If I pushed too hard, it could backfire, but if I stayed silent, I'd be letting Nathan win. "I don't want to say too much," I said finally, lowering my voice. "But let's just say my departure wasn't as clean as Nathan made it seem. There were differences in how credit was allocated on the Silverline campaign." Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. "Interesting," she said, her tone neutral but her expression anything but. We talked for a few more minutes before parting ways, and as I left the event that night, I felt a flicker of hope for the first time in months. I didn't need to expose Nathan outright, not yet. All I needed to do was make people question him, little by little. With Rachel's doubts planted, I turned my attention to rebuilding my professional reputation. It wasn't easy, word travels fast in the marketing world, and Nathan's version of events had reached far more ears than I'd anticipated. But I refused to let that stop me. I started small, reaching out to former colleagues who'd left Redwood on good terms. I asked for freelance opportunities, offering to help with campaigns, strategy, and analytics. Most of them were hesitant at first, but as I delivered results, their trust grew. Within months, I had a steady stream of work, enough to pay the bills and rebuild my confidence. But freelance gigs weren't enough. If I really wanted to take on Nathan, I needed something bigger, something that would put me back on the map. That's when I decided to start my own agency. It wasn't as crazy as it sounded. By now, I had built up a solid portfolio of freelance work, and I knew there was a demand for the kind of bold, innovative campaigns I specialized in. The trick was convincing potential clients to take a chance on someone who'd been publicly burned by Redwood. To do that, I needed a headline client. It took weeks of planning, networking, and cold emails, but eventually, I landed a meeting with none other than Rachel Green. She'd been cordial but distant since our conversation at the networking event, and I could tell she was still on the fence about whether to trust me. The meeting was my make-or-break moment. I spent days perfecting my pitch, crafting a campaign idea so compelling that Silverline wouldn't be able to resist. When the day finally came, I walked into the Silverline offices with my head held high, determined to prove my worth. Rachel and her team listened intently as I laid out my vision, a bold, data-driven campaign that would set Silverline apart from their competitors and redefine their brand for a new generation. By the time I finished, the room was silent, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, Rachel leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. "Well, Emily," she said, "I have to admit, this is impressive. Very impressive." For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel something close to hope. But as I left the meeting, I knew this was only the beginning. If Silverline signed with me, it would be a direct challenge to Nathan and Redwood. It would be the first step in taking back what he'd stolen, and making sure he paid for what he'd done. The week after my meeting with Rachel at Silverline was the longest of my life. Every day, I refreshed my email 100 times, anxiously waiting for a response. I knew the stakes. If Silverline signed with my agency, it would be more than a big break, it would be my ticket back into the industry, my chance to not only rebuild but to finally hit Nathan where it hurt. When the email finally came, I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table with a lukewarm cup of coffee. The subject line read, "Silverline Partnership Proposal, Next Steps." My hand trembled as I opened it. "Dear Emily, thank you for your recent presentation and campaign pitch. We were incredibly impressed with your vision and strategic approach. We'd like to move forward with your agency as our new marketing partner. Let's schedule a call to discuss next steps. Best regards, Rachel Green." I stared at the screen, rereading the email until the words blurred. My chest felt tight, and for a moment, I thought I might cry. Not from sadness, but from sheer relief. After months of humiliation, doubt, and anger, I had a win. And not just any win, I had Silverline. The call was scheduled for the following day. Rachel explained the terms of the partnership, and as we finalized the details, she casually dropped a bombshell. "Nathan wasn't thrilled when we told him," she said, her tone light but loaded with subtext. "He tried to convince us to stay with Redwood, of course. But in the end, your ideas spoke for themselves." I bit back a smile. "I'm glad you saw the potential in what I brought to the table." "Oh, we did," Rachel said. Then, after a pause, "I'll admit, though, his reaction was surprising. He wasn't just disappointed. He seemed angry. Almost panicked. Panicked." The word lingered in my mind long after the call ended. For the first time, Nathan was feeling the sting of rejection, the sting of losing control. And this was just the beginning. The fallout came faster than I expected. A week after signing Silverline, I started hearing whispers. Former colleagues from Redwood reached out, asking if the rumors were true. Did Silverline really drop Nathan for me? Was I back in the game? I kept my answers vague, but the truth was clear, word was spreading, and it was making waves. Nathan, meanwhile, wasn't taking the loss quietly. I heard through the grapevine that he was furious. He'd been blindsided by Silverline's decision, and worse, he couldn't spin it in his favor. Everyone in the industry knew that losing a client as big as Silverline was a blow, not just financially, but to Redwood's reputation. And yet, Nathan being Nathan, he wasn't about to let it go. The first attack came in the form of a smear campaign. One morning, I woke up to a flood of emails and texts from colleagues and clients. Someone, Nathan, obviously, had started spreading rumors that I'd poached Silverline by undercutting Redwood's fees, offering them a cheap and unsustainable deal. Others claimed I'd stolen Redwood's proprietary campaign ideas and repackaged them as my own. The accusations were ridiculous, but they stung all the same. Nathan knew exactly where to hit me, my credibility. If people started to believe I'd built my agency on unethical practices, it could destroy everything I was working for. At first, I panicked. My initial instinct was to confront Nathan directly, to call him out for his lies and force him to back down. But then I realized that was exactly what he wanted. He wanted me to look unprofessional, defensive, and out of control. Instead, I decided to let my work do the talking. The first few weeks of the Silverline campaign were grueling. I threw myself into the project with everything I had, determined to prove that I didn't just deserve the account, I deserved to lead the industry. I worked closely with Rachel and her team, refining every detail of the campaign until it was flawless. It wasn't just about creating a marketing strategy, it was about building trust. Rachel had taken a risk by choosing me over Nathan, and I wanted her to feel that she'd made the right call. By the time we launched, the results spoke for themselves. Within days, Silverline's online presence exploded. Social media engagement doubled, website traffic surged, and their brand recognition hit record highs. The success was undeniable, and the timing couldn't have been better. Clients and competitors alike were watching, waiting to see if I would crash and burn. Instead, I delivered a campaign that not only matched Redwood's past efforts but exceeded them. And as the praise started rolling in, Nathan's lies began to unravel. I didn't have to wait long for the next blow. 2 weeks after the campaign launch, I got a call from an old friend, Maya, who still worked at Redwood. Maya had been one of the few people at the firm who genuinely supported me, and I trusted her to give me the inside scoop. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice low. "Nathan's losing it." I leaned forward in my chair. "What do you mean?" Silverline was just the beginning. After they dropped us, a couple of smaller clients started questioning their contracts. Apparently, they're not happy with the way Nathan's been handling their accounts. Word is, they're considering leaving too. I couldn't help but smile. Nathan's empire was starting to crack, and I hadn't even done anything, yet. But Maya wasn't done. "There's more," she said. "The execs are starting to talk. They're worried about the firm's reputation. If Redwood loses too many accounts, it could get messy. And Nathan, well, he's not exactly inspiring confidence right now. He's been acting paranoid, lashing out at people during meetings. I think he knows he's in trouble." The image of Nathan, usually so composed and self-assured, unraveling under the pressure filled me with a dark sense of satisfaction. But I wasn't going to stop there. Nathan had built his career by taking from others, stealing ideas, crushing rivals, and stepping on anyone who got in his way. Now, it was his turn to lose. The final phase of my plan began with an anonymous tip. By now, I'd gathered enough intel on Nathan to know that his success wasn't just built on unethical behavior, it was built on outright fraud. He'd been inflating campaign budgets for years, skimming off the top to fund his lavish lifestyle. I'd suspected it for a while, but it wasn't until Maya slipped me a few key documents that I had proof. The tip went to a well-known industry journalist, someone with a reputation for exposing shady practices at high-profile companies. I made sure the evidence was airtight: emails, invoices, even client complaints that Nathan had tried to bury. The article dropped 2 weeks later. The headline was brutal: Redwood Marketing CEO accused of fraud and mismanagement. The piece laid everything bare: the financial discrepancies, the unethical treatment of employees, and the loss of major accounts like Silverline. Within hours, the story went viral. Industry forums lit up with discussions about Nathan's downfall, and Redwood's remaining clients began to distance themselves from the firm. And Nathan? He was nowhere to be found. By the end of the month, Redwood was a shell of its former self. Clients had fled, employees were jumping ship, and Nathan had been forced to step down as CEO. The man who had once controlled my fate, who had stolen my career and left me to pick up the pieces, was now facing the same humiliation he'd inflicted on so many others. I didn't feel guilty. Not for a second. Nathan had created this mess, and he deserved every consequence. As for me, my agency was thriving. Silverline wasn't just a client, they were my partner, my champion in an industry that had once written me off. Nathan had tried to ruin me, but in the end, I'd done something he never could: I built something real. Nathan was finished, or so I thought. Redwood was in ruins, his reputation shredded, and he had seemingly vanished from the industry overnight. For months, I basked in the glow of my hard-earned victory. My agency was thriving, new clients were pouring in, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my destiny. But as anyone who's played this game knows, the higher you climb, the more dangerous it gets. And Nathan? Nathan wasn't the kind of man to stay down for long. It started with whispers. One evening, I was at a dinner party hosted by Rachel Green, celebrating the second phase of our wildly successful Silverline campaign. The room was buzzing with energy, executives, creative directors, and industry insiders mingling over cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. I was mid-conversation with a potential client when I overheard something that made my stomach twist. "I heard Nathan's back," someone said, their voice low but unmistakable. I froze, my champagne glass halfway to my lips. "Really?" another voice chimed in. "I thought he'd disappeared for good after that fraud scandal." "Apparently not," the first voice replied. "Word is, he's working on something big. Some kind of tech venture. And get this, he's got investors lined up already." I forced myself to smile and finish my conversation, but inside, my mind was racing. Nathan? Back? It didn't seem possible. The article that had exposed his fraud had been damning enough to end anyone's career. How could he have bounced back so quickly? I left the party early, my mind a swirl of questions. If Nathan was making a comeback, I needed to find out what he was planning, and fast. Over the next few weeks, I dug into every lead I could find. Nathan had gone dark on social media, and his name wasn't attached to any official business filings or projects. But then, late one night, I found something. A press release from a new tech startup called Vanguard Horizons. The release didn't mention Nathan by name, but the language was eerily familiar, buzzwords and overblown promises that reminded me of every pitch he'd ever given. And then there was the timing. Vanguard Horizons had secured millions in funding just weeks after Redwood's collapse. The real kicker came when I scrolled to the bottom of the release. Listed as the company's strategic advisor was none other than Charles Atwood, a venture capitalist who had been one of Redwood's biggest investors before the scandal. If Nathan wasn't officially involved, he was pulling the strings from behind the curtain. I should have left it alone. I'd already won. Nathan's career was in tatters, my agency was thriving, and I had everything I'd ever wanted. But the idea of him sneaking back into the industry, profiting from the same lies and manipulation that had destroyed so many others, made my blood boil. Nathan needed to be stopped, once and for all. It took weeks to track him down, but I finally found him. A mutual acquaintance, someone who owed me a favor, tipped me off that Nathan was hosting a private dinner with a group of potential investors at an exclusive restaurant downtown. I dressed the part, sleek, confident, untouchable, and walked in as though I belonged. The hostess gave me a curious look but didn't stop me as I made my way to the private dining room. Through the glass doors, I saw Nathan sitting at the head of the table, laughing with a group of well-dressed men and women. For a moment, I hesitated. He looked different. Thinner, older, with deep lines etched into his face. The confident, untouchable man I'd once feared was gone, replaced by someone desperate to reclaim his former glory. But as I watched him, my hesitation turned to anger. Nathan might have fallen, but he hadn't learned. He was still the same manipulative, self-serving fraud he'd always been, and now he was lining up a new group of victims. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room fell silent as every head turned to look at me. Nathan's smile froze, and for a moment, I thought I saw fear flash in his eyes. "Emily," he said, recovering quickly. "What a surprise." "I bet it is," I said, my voice calm but sharp. I glanced around the table, making eye contact with each of the investors. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought it was important for you all to know exactly who you're getting into business with." One of the investors, a woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor, frowned. And who exactly is he? I smiled, pulling a folder from my bag and setting it on the table. Nathan Grant. Former CEO of Redwood Marketing. Forced to step down after a major fraud scandal. Inflated budgets, embezzled funds, destroyed careers. I'm sure you've heard the stories. The room erupted in murmurs, and Nathan's face went pale. This is absurd, he said, his voice shaking. Emily's just a bitter former employee. She's been trying to ruin me for years. Oh, I'm not bitter, I said, locking eyes with him. But I do believe in accountability. And if any of you would like to see the proof for yourselves, it's all right here. I tapped the folder. Nathan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Get out, he hissed. I leaned in, lowering my voice so only he could hear. You don't get to come back from this, Nathan. Not after everything you've done. It's over. I turned and walked out, leaving him to deal with the fallout. I thought that was the end of it. But a week later, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in bold letters. You think you've won, but this isn't over. Watch your back. My stomach dropped. Nathan wasn't just angry, he was vengeful. The scandal hit the industry like a bombshell. After my confrontation, word spread quickly, and Vanguard Horizons collapsed before it even got off the ground. Nathan disappeared again, but this time, it felt different. He wasn't retreating, he was lying in wait. For months, I was on edge, checking over my shoulder, wondering when and where he'd strike. And then, one morning, it happened. An article appeared online, accusing me of unethical practices, stealing clients, sabotaging competitors, manipulating employees. It was a mirror of everything Nathan had done, but this time, the target was me. The accusations were baseless, but the damage was done. Clients started questioning me. Potential deals fell through. My hard-earned reputation was suddenly under siege, and I knew exactly who was behind it. Nathan had lost everything, and now he was determined to take me down with him. As I write this, my agency is still standing, but barely. Every day feels like a battle to keep the truth alive, to prove that I'm not the villain Nathan wants me to be. And somewhere out there, he's watching, waiting for me to slip. I thought I could destroy him. I thought revenge would set me free. But now I realize, when you go to war with someone like Nathan, the fight never really ends.